Welcome to EWA's FIN-LYT podcast. EWA is a fee-only RIA based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We hope all listeners of this podcast will benefit as we deep dive into complex financial topics that we will make simplified for you. And we hope that this really serves as a catalyst so that you can make the best financial planning decisions for your family and also save time. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode joined here by Jamison Smith. We're talking about the economy, stock market, all the effects that could potentially occur now that the presidential election has been decided. So, Jamison, welcome, and let's get rolling.
Yeah. I think before we dive in, what's your take on the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight this weekend?
Oh, that's a good. I think Jake Paul will win. But, I mean, Mike Tyson's obviously a legend. He's just... But, I mean, Jake Paul is he's dedicated his life to boxing now. And, he's surprised so many people. I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah.
It's free, too. It's on
Netflix, yeah.
What do you think?
I think I like Jake Paul. I think from what I've heard, power's the last thing that goes in a boxer. So, Mike Tyson won't have his speed, but if he connects, he could really get him. So
it could be over like that.
Could, but, yeah, again, I think it's... My opinion is totally speculation. I think it's Mike Tyson wants to make money. This probably makes him.
How much do they have making? 100, some crazy.
I don't know. I mean, if you look, Tom Brady made $20 million off that roast on Netflix. This is probably bigger than that because they're filling up Cowboy Stadium. They did a documentary on it, so
hyping it up.
20 to 50. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be life changing probably for someone that.
And they're saying Mike Tyson was saying this is probably the biggest boxing match ever. So
in
ever
history,
just because of how promoted it, how hyped up it's been. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, so Jake Paul's like the master, just marketer, promoter,
hyper.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that Mike Tyson wants money and Jake Paul wants to win because he wants to keep his career going.
It's true. Yeah, and that I watched that fight with Fury because he has one loss.
Yeah,
that was pretty close. I mean,
oh yeah, and then he actually he fired all of his coaches after that, Jake Paul. And so they had to rework. He had to rework his whole style. They said he had a bunch of the new coach came in. He had a bunch of just technique issues, and so they just stripped his whole. It'd be like reworking your golf swings from scratch. So it'll be interesting. Yeah.
But he's fought since then though.
Yeah, he fought in July.
And won.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your biggest surprise sport in the sports world? I'd say Cavs right now, undefeated.
13-0. That's insane.
Yeah, I may travel out to go see him.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell, it's legit.
Steelers, I mean, they're a surprise.
Big surprise. But, I mean, Steelers always find a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Washington Commanders were until...
Who's your Super Bowl pick? Don't say the Chiefs.
I mean, you can't get 9-0 with, what they're dealing with, injuries. They have, half their roster. So, I can't bet against the Chiefs. The Chiefs and... The NFC is wild.
I'm saying Lions. I think Lions.
Yeah, Lions are good. Yeah, Chiefs Lions could be a good pick. Yeah.
All right.
The NFC is it's tough. I mean, it's kind of up in the air. Lions are probably the best team.
I want Baker to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
They still have a chance, but they've dropped a couple close ones. But.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, should we get into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's just preface. We don't. We're not taking any political stance, and we recommend part of your financial plan and your investment policy. Do not mix the two. Don't mix your political beliefs with how you invest. Don't mix your political beliefs with how you financial plan. With that being said, absolutely use the information to educate and inform the decisions to make sure you and your plan is as successful as possible. You're paying as little taxes as possible, legally speaking, and you're making as much from an investment return perspective. That's how we view it. But Republican versus Democrats, very little difference in investment returns over the last 100 years. Less than 1%, in fact. I think Democrats leading the lead by a little bit, return-wise, like an S&P 500. But what's very clear is you stay invested regardless of what party's in office.
Yeah, I think that's important. We're going to look at this very objectively,
pretty black.
Hopefully nobody takes this as we're taking a side. We're going to look at this objectively and see how this could impact things. But it's just pretty funny after.
Well, speaking of sides, Jamie, who did you vote for? I'm just kidding. Let's get into it.
But I was just saying, it's pretty even after the election, you have people on the left that like freak out and they think like, I've literally heard I want to pull my money out of the market. And then you have people on the right that are like so overly optimistic. So it's like,
neither is true.
no, neither are true.
I think Scott Galloway has this quote, or maybe he took the quote from the book. I forget, but like, and he's very left leaning.
Yeah.
But like, and so that's kind of who I get my information of like from. And then on the right, there's so much. Obviously, that's all you're going to hear now in the news now that the election's over. But he has the quote that says, you know, it's never as good or as bad as it seems.
Yeah.
And I love that quote. That's so true in life. Like things that are stressful always end up being okay, like 99% of the time. And then things that are really good end up being not that good. You know, it's like a nuke. It lasts for 2 days and then it's over. So the other quote I'm going to preface this is Seneca, we suffer more in imagination than in reality.
Most stress is imagined,
I think that's a really important one, is the political. Regardless of political beliefs, regardless of what side you're in, I mean, there's stress because you're, at this point, I mean, some people are thinking about moving out of the country, rightfully so, because some of their values are like at risk right now. They feel like are being attacked. And then, you know, if this is the result you want, you know, you probably have a lot of like judgment from some friends or family that disagree with you. So it's a stressful time. We want to acknowledge that. But we're taking the financial planning and the investment side, and we just hope, you know, in general, the company has unity, has peace, and can, you know, maintain its strength to be what we believe strongly is the best place to live, raise a family, and to, you know, to operate.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Yeah, well, let's dive in. I think one thing to note too, so the markets love certainty, and so that's part of the reason why we've seen this like run the last 2 weeks. What people thought was that like this election wasn't going to be decided as quickly as it was, and it would be like some day, you know, a couple of days of uncertainty. We're not going to know what happens, but like Trump won decisively, and that's what's caused this uptick in the market.
Bump.
Yeah, but basically, if you look at an overview of like his agenda and campaign promises, there's a couple of just like key points. Again, let's also preface like this all has to get passed. Yeah, he has control.
This is educational.
Yeah, so this like all of this stuff could just never get passed if you know none of this happens. So again, speculation.
It's likely that some change will occur,
Yeah.
being that the Senate and the House are now
at least for the next 2 years. Yeah,
Republican.
But the main promises are tax cuts, deportation, tariffs, deregulation, inflation reduction. So we'll take a deep dive into those and how that'll impact investing, financial planning. But Matt, why don't we start with what's the lay of the land with tax cuts, the tax environment, what the tax code is like?
Yeah, so in 2017, Trump passes, when he was in the office, his first term was huge, this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And so I think part of the negotiation to get it passed was it was temporary. It was end of 2020. 2025 is the last calendar year. 2026, it reset back to what it was under Obama. And so I think one of the first agenda items is they're going to look to just extend those tax cuts. So the big things, like from a simplistic basis for individuals, is just the tax brackets were cut for, you know, higher income earners, like 39.6% was cut to 37%, and how much of a runway you had for some of the lower and middle brackets kind of, you know, extended. So definitely a cut for, you know, generally speaking, for middle and upper class. That's some people had a big problem with it. It was like, this is a tax cut for rich people, because, you know, some of the biggest tax cuts were, you know, shaving 2.6% off of anything. I think it's like 700,000 right now. It could be a big deal for someone making a couple million a year. So the other one that's going to affect the stock market was he cut the corporate tax rates down dramatically. And so that was the market you kind of saw going up even before the election. They were kind of pricing in a Trump win, is because, you know, if tax rates are cut, the belief is that corporations have more free cash flow rises profits, more profits drive price to earning ratios, and that's what stock prices are driven by. And so there's a belief now that those tax rates will stay at 21 or even be cut down to 15.
Like 15 is
his proposal now, I believe, is 15. So that could be good news, you know, for stock market investors. But I just want to look historically. I don't think it matters as much as the stock market typically moves like expecting what's going to happen in 6 months. And so even when corporate tax rates were really high, I just want to remind people, like, corporations have, and this is just an opinion, I think a lot of like governmental workers, they'll make like a big case and then they'll go find a corporate job. And so like the really good people end up, the smartest people in the world, I believe, are usually part of corporations, not government. So like the point is they can figure out high tax brackets, low tax brackets. Corporations over decades have figured out how to make it work. So I think the tax rates are important to consider, but I don't want to overblow it because even if tax rates went back up, corporations would figure it out.
Yeah, they figure out some way to navigate. They're still going to be profitable.
What else from a tax perspective, Jamison?
Yeah, I would say the one of the big rebuttals or devil's advocate to any of the tax stuff is that it'll increase the deficit. So more debt, which I don't know this for sure. I think when Trump was in office 4 years, the deficit went up because he cut the taxes. And so basically there has to be something to counter. You have to cut spending somewhere to make up for that. So that's like the biggest question. But things like, so as far as financial planning, I mean, the estate exemption is really high, almost $13 million person-ish. That probably will stay for another 4 years. There's a lot of talks to bring that down. So there's a planning opportunity. Like you said, low income tax rates and then capital gains rates are favorable compared to where they were historically. Other things he talked about was like exempting tips from taxes, exempting Social Security benefits from taxes, and then having deductions on car loans and increase like state and local tax deductions. So will that get passed? Who knows? But the big thing is it could be a window of opportunity in the next like 4 years to do some strategic tax planning, especially around estate exemption if you're in that net worth ballpark.
Yes, it's interesting. Exempting tips, not to get too much in. I can see pros and cons for all of these.
Yeah.
Like the exempting tips, you kind of make it more attractive for people to stay in that industry, and that's obviously a services based industry. It's amazing. And there's nothing better than having like an amazing waiter, good, and they can do very well. So exempting tips could be a game changer for a lot of families. I could see it as a detraction away from higher education. If they're like, well, I can just go there and make the same as I would. I don't have to take out school loans. So I could see that as a pro and a con on both sides. Mm-hmm. Exempting Social Security benefits. This one I'm kind of undecided about. Social Security is a tax you pay into your whole life. Then you go to take the money out and you get taxed on it again. And it's either if you're really low income, then it's tax free, or 50% of it's taxable. But most people, it's 85% of your Social Security benefits become taxable to you again. So I think it makes a logical sense that they're not taxed, but we really have to examine so the majority of Social Security benefits, just for most people, you read this clickbait articles, the trust fund is going to run out in the next, 10 years. I don't have the exact date offhand, but you have to realize most of it, over 2/3 of it, is funded from free cash flows of people like me and you that are funding the Social Security system and funding it out. So that's not as big of a deal as people hype it. I know it gets weaponized a lot between candidates of like, you're going to take your Social Security is not going away. 95% of people, and I'm sorry, 2/3 of the population that's retired right now, like if you take their Social Security benefits away, they just can't live. Yeah.
That's when I was doing the research on this, that was one of the things that there's all this talk of like they're going to go in and clean up government efficiency, cut a bunch of spending, but that like really only goes so far. From my research, majority of the like spending in the government, I don't know if I want to say majority because I don't know the stats, but a lot of it's tied up in entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, and Democrats and Republicans both agree that like there's nothing you can do because some people rely on it.
And I think some people with poor planning, unfortunately, or just let's face it. I mean, the zip code you're born into can affect your lifespan by 20 years plus, right? So some people just didn't have the opportunity. Some people have been more blessed from a financial perspective, but most everybody has Social Security benefits. I do think it's a way to really, because you've seen a big shift of like the rich have gotten richer, the poor have gotten poorer, and I think this taking the Social Security tax off away would be basically the first time you are taking some money probably from the rich into the poor. Because you fund the system by probably increasing the Social Security wage base for higher income earners, or cutting, we're going to talk about the deregulation, all this other stuff. Or, but if you think about it, someone that's maxed out in Social Security, they're using their Social Security to eat up the first 10, the 12% tax bracket. So if you're pulling in $50 a year from Social Security and you're married, it's probably $5 or $6 grand of saving. And if you're a multi-millionaire, is $5 or $6 grand going to help you? Like, no, that's like a day of stock market volatility. It's nothing. But for a a low income earner that has like a net worth under $1 million that's going to save $3,000 or $4,000, that could be life changing. An extra $300 or $400 a month for someone that's living paycheck to paycheck in retirement, life changing. So I do like the Social Security benefits taking the tax away. I do. And then what was the other one? The other one was so tips and the deductions for car loan interest and state and local taxes. Yeah, that I'd say that's a very highly speculative.
Yeah, because what the SALT tax
capped at 10,000.
I think it was uncapped before, or maybe it was higher. I know that was part of when the 2017 tax cut got capped at 10.
Yeah, was to recoup.
Yeah, some of the lost IRS money from the lower the brackets. Yeah.
So,
okay, anything else on taxes?
No, it'll be interesting to see. And then I think did it go? So Vivek and Elon Musk have been part of like the
government efficiency
so they're cutting. So it'll be interesting. I read one article that was like, I think he wants to like almost get rid of the IRS. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's one thing we can talk about. The deregulation is like they're really coming after the SEC, the IRS, like all these government agencies. They're trying to just slash.
And I think listen, there's got to be church and state. There's got to be accountability. But it'll be interesting to see. Can this be simplified? Can we see more of a level playing field? And again, I'm not giving away my political beliefs here. I'm just thinking this is just human nature, empathy 101. Does someone worth $1 billion need $2 billion? Probably not. Does someone living paycheck to paycheck need a couple $100 a month? Yeah. So I mean, hopefully there can be an efficiency of instead of finding getting people speeding tickets for going 2 miles over the. I'm just using that as an analogy from the IRS perspective. We can focus on the kind of the big picture of the wealth gap that exists in America. Yeah. So, but it'll be interesting to see so just in summary from a tax perspective, like financial planning, it's super important to know this, to work with an advisor that can navigate you through it to maximize tax savings, more money in your pocket. And then obviously from a stock market perspective, we're monitoring it very closely from what companies are going to be set up, and we'll get into that later, for success.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
One of the big things that Trump used as a selling point, I guess, would be the tariffs. How he's going to slap those on like China as an example. And then the other side was essentially like, no, this is going to hurt the middle class net. They did some studies, I think a couple $4,000 a year is going to hurt like middle class families. So talk about this. How could it affect individuals, the stock market, et cetera, and what's the purpose behind it? Yeah,
the big question is, will it increase inflation? If you're putting tariffs on goods that are coming in, somebody has to pay for that. Will they increase prices if importers eat the costs, which probably unlikely. But one thing is like in his first term, a lot of that was just used as a threat. When you're negotiating, there were some things that got put in place with Mexico and China. China's, from what he says, is different because there's a military threat. But in general, it's to be determined if that's actually going to get put into law, or if it'll just be like a negotiating threat with other negotiating tactic with other countries. But yeah, the main question is, will it increase inflation? Generally speaking, tariffs increase the price of the goods that you buy that are coming in. But there are things that could counteract that, and one would be like if the U.S. dollar rises in value, that could offset some of the inflation. So to be determined, but one of basically the big thing to watch is inflation.
Gotcha. Okay. And the next thing is, he put, I believe, Elon Musk and Vivek on his committee for governmental efficiency. So one of the things that they're pushing pretty hard for is deregulation. Pros and cons of this, obviously the con being, more deregulate. People are greedy, corporations are greedy, and there's not as much accountability in place. But on the flip side is there's a lot of inefficiencies that exist with these different agencies. Sometimes they're just looking for speeding tickets 1 or 2 miles over, just as an example. And are they just revenue generating agencies, or are they actually catching bad guys? Is kind of the thought process out there. So what are some of the big industries that they're looking at for deregulation? How do we see this affecting the stock market overall?
The big thing, or the big sector, is energy, deregulating energy. But it's a lot of attack on government agencies, good or bad, who knows. But basically the impacts could be lower cost to businesses, so businesses wouldn't have as much costs in compliance and regulation fees. Increase competition within industries, so lower barrier to entry if there's less regulation, which could create competition, would create competition. And then you could see different sectors begin to grow. So like in the last 2 weeks, banking stocks have gone up because banking is obviously a really regulated industry. And if regulation stripped back, they could be more profitable. But finance, energy, tech's another one. Tech's very highly regulated. If some regulation gets stripped back, tech stocks could increase. And from my understanding of this, short term, there could be some price rise in stocks, but could create long-term volatility because there would just be more competition within these industries. So there's a lower barrier to entry. So could create some sector plays in investment, but yeah, I guess that's kind of the long.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one way to look at this is like the heavy regulation. One of the things that people are worried about, rightfully so, is that there's monopolies that exist, like Facebook, Google. Like they're able to block certain it's very hard to be a competitor, but if you deregulate, then you can have more bad actors. But at the same time, then you could potentially take some of those powerhouses down.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the government has aided in a way. They fought them, but they've almost aided a way in helping them become monopoly. Because when it's so regulated, it's hard for a small fish to even get up and running.
Yeah, for sure.
And compete. So that could be, again, pros and cons to any of this. And, on both sides, obviously would argue both ways. So I think the other... What else, if anything, on deregulation would you see we should be looking out for? Obviously, from a portfolio perspective, we have infrastructure as a concentrated holding we have. We're tilted towards growth, which would mean more tech over value at this point. We'll see benefiting under the next 4 years. Anything else to talk before we move to inflation?
No, I think it's really just watching what actually gets passed and how that impacts the industries, and then different sectors could become more favorable.
Absolutely. Okay, so inflation, he's come out and said overall goal is want to keep inflation down. What are we seeing out there as far as proposals and other policies could have an effect on this being true or not true?
It'll be interesting if, like, the tariffs, for example, like tariffs could increase inflation. Will he pull back on that if it's going to, if the inflation starts to go up? But in general, I mean, deregulation generally would decrease inflation. Lower energy prices with deregulation would decrease inflation. Lower taxes could help inflation. Interest rates could, and then if the tariffs are successful in raising inflation, that could also spark rising interest rates, which could be unfavorable for a lot of reasons. But totally speculating on inflation, we really have no idea.
Yeah. But it's been a hot topic.
Yeah.
Because the record levels we saw after COVID affected a lot of people.
Sure.
Okay. Well, just to summarize, so, we've got taxes, sector investing. We want to talk about like markets outside of the U.S., tech and momentum. So just taxes. I mean, estate planning opportunities, if that gets extended past 2026 when it's set to sunset, then really high net worth people have the runway to do more thoughtful planning over a long period of time to get those exemptions utilized if they have the means to do so. It also means that the percentage of the population that would need something like an irrevocable trust older right now would decrease. We would still think for someone younger as a top 1%er should still be considering long term. They're probably going to outgrow because with so much of the political power shift right now, that means usually in 4, 8, 12 years there's going to be a shift back. So these things can ebb and flow. So if you're young, you really say, oh, it's increased. Well, that could change dramatically again if there's a shift in power. The lower capital gain rates, we may want to look at intentionally realizing capital gains because the other side was saying we're going to increase them to income rates for some high income earners. Roth conversions, Roth planning, if it's still tax code continues to permit. And then we could see some additional tax benefits for small businesses that we'll keep our eye on. So, James, just summarize some of the sector investing.
Like we mentioned, energy, defense, infrastructure, finance. I mean, anything that could benefit from this. You could see an uptick in stock prices, mainly from deregulation and then infrastructure spending, defense spending, things like that. How are we implementing that, and how have we implemented that in the portfolio? Yeah,
so we've introduced, right after the election, we introduced a small position in gold. That's more some of the bank regulations and what's happening internationally. I addressed that in detail there. So infrastructure, we have a direct, obviously, exposure there. on top of the natural exposure you would have in some of the index funds. We have that specific fund. And the energy and defense, it'll be really, I think, a momentum play if some of the regulations happen. We have a factor investing in several of the funds, but the momentum will really pick that up as well.
Yeah. And then international emerging markets could create some risks and uncertainty with the tariffs and everything. But generally, if people think the dollar will increase, who knows, value of foreign investments begin to decrease because when you convert that money back to the U.S. dollar, it's worthless.
Yep. So we're staying with our overweight to domestic, U.S. investments versus international. So we're overweight U.S. and also we're excluding China from the emerging markets strongly because of what's going on in their economy right now, population crisis, real estate crisis, and then also obviously not good relationship right now with the U.S.
Yeah.
So
And I'd say just to sum it all up, the big takeaway is don't make any emotional or rational decisions based on political beliefs and stay diversified.
Absolutely.
If you hit all the asset classes, it's harder to lose.
Well, good news is this was educational only. We're going to be keeping a close eye on obviously taxes, how that affects your financial plan, then obviously the market, everything portfolio we'll be addressing as we go as well. But please reach out with any questions and look forward to catching everyone next week. Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. Hopefully you found this helpful. Really hope this is as beneficial and impactful to as many people across the nation as possible. So hit the follow button. Make sure to rate the podcast and please share with any friends or family members that would also find this beneficial. Thank you very much.